Funscale models. This series is focusing on building the Funscale Park Flyer P40C Tomahawk. We'll be continuing construction of the fuselage in this episode. So with the wing saddles complete, the next step that we have to work on is to work on the hatch area here. There's a couple additional pieces as well as some magnets that need to go in. There's a magnet that goes there, and there's one that goes there, and there's also parts or magnets that go into the parts in the hatch itself. I got them from Amazing Magnets. This is the information on them. You get about 50 of them in a bag, so quite a bit left over. They're 1/8 inch round and 3/32 inch in thickness. So I'll be test fitting them in the spot, and I'll also be using some scrap balsa wood that I had laying around just to back up, making sure that it's got some additional surface area. So go ahead and I'll put them in place. So I'm going to just sort of eyeball this here, and I'm using another set of magnets to sort of hold it in place. So see how it's sort of sticking out a little bit, then I'll just use a scrap piece. So we'll go ahead and we'll use some slow glue to get this part on. So we're just going to go ahead and I'm going to work here. I'm going to apply the glue over the magnet and in this area here. Okay, so here we can see that that part is glued on and the magnet is nice and flush with the surface. I'll show the trick on how we make sure we have the correct polarity when we glue in the other piece in just a little bit here. I'll do the same for the piece back here. So next we'll work on the hatch itself. As you can see here, I've laid out some of the parts. We have F3A, which will go more in the middle area here. We have F6A, which goes back in this, makes the rear of the hatch. There's F4A, which is the front of the hatch. It gets slidden up here. I've made a couple of upper hatch rails from 1/4 by 3/32, and just like this here, to make sure we don't have any bowing, I've added a little bit of scrap in there. And I also have a kind of a more dense, harder piece of 3/32 square that I'm going to use not only as a marker, but for the top part of the hatch. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to protect the parts from gluing to each other that we don't want to glue to each other. The first thing I'm going to do again is look at the orientation of F4A. I'm going to want to have the markings on the inside. I'm going to, on the outside, put some clear tape, and I'll show that in just a moment here. I'll do the same with this part as well. So with the two hatch rails set in place, you can see how the tape is sort of sticking out. It's a little bit time consuming, but it does really help later on. The next thing that we want to do is to mark where the F5A goes. So the easiest thing I've found to do is just use a piece of scrap and actually mark it directly. So I'm looking at buttoning it up against F6A, and I'm just going to put a mark there. And then just transfer it onto the model. And then later when we attach it, we can set it right on top of those marks and center it. So let's go ahead and we'll insert F6A and push that up against it. Sort of snug that up. Getting the other part in, F4A is a little bit more of a tricky thing. Set it up. One thing that we can do is, as mentioned, we have this scrap piece, right? So the F5A part does tilt slightly back towards the rear of the airplane. So if this is straight up and down, this is a slight tilt back. So we use the notch that we had in the mark, on our marking piece of stringer. Set it in there, line it up with our marks, make sure that part is centered, double checking the angle, looks good. Drop some glue in. Later on, we'll trim this part off, sand it flush before we start the canopy. We have the final stringer to install, and that's the number 1 stringer on both sides. It goes all the way from F5 to F1. There isn't a significant curve on this one, so I'm not going to add a substringer. It's pretty straightforward. You'll just want to make sure that your end is nice and trimmed up. Now, one thing you can find is sometimes, whether it be on this stringer or other stringers, it sort of does this here and there, and that's easy to fix. You can just get a small sander and go in and sand it as needed so that it's a much more straighter transition. We'll go ahead and glue this in place. It does not go to this one, so just be aware of that. You'll want to be careful here. You'll kind of want to glue on the back side of both stringers, or both formers, excuse me. Now in this one here, you can see there's a slight little bit that I sanded away there. If you want, you can always fill that in with some scrap. I don't think that'll even be noticed once I cover it. We'll do the other side, and that'll be it for the stringers for the fuselage. We're at the stage now where we need to start shaping these areas that are in that are proud of the formers. I want to start with the hatch rails first. One of the things I'm going to use though is regular masking tape. It doesn't matter if it's the tan, if it's the blue, the green, it doesn't matter. It just has to have some good stick. And we're going to use it to help protect the formers. So I'm going to lay it right underneath, sort of doing it with tension. Let me show you the camera here. There. And so what this does is you can go ahead and plane down, but you are going to hit the paper or the tape first before you hit the other structure. I'm going to do the same thing for the top here as well. And it also sort of makes a nice guide for you. Alright, so you can see that there. We've got protection for our surrounding areas. Then we're going to use our small block plane to shape it, to basically get it to blend with the fuselage. And we'll finalize it with sanding. That's pretty close there. And we'll use our large sanding block. And you know you're basically there when this starts to happen, where it starts to hit the high points of the formers. We'll go ahead and we'll stop and we'll move on to another section. So with that complete and with that removed, just looking at the section here where we sanded or actually planed, it really blends in nice. We have to do, of course, the rest of the fuselage, including this hatch rail next. But we'll also blend all of this in with the large sanding block. So given the whole area in the chin, kind of a continuous sanding here. That'll also take down some of the stringers that are a little bit too high and blend in the rest. So you can see here some of that charring is going away. That lets us know we're good to stop. Blend that in a little bit as well. We really want to focus more towards the front end of the airplane here for right now. So with sanding pads, I'm going to come in here also with just a small sanding block or sanding pad. Clean this up a little bit. And then this is just a sort of a medium to light coarse sanding pad. It helps us keep the overall shape, as well as take off those burrs that we mentioned. And I'm not grabbing with my hand, I'm just sort of cradling it. It's one of the things I've learned through trial and error and through pain is I've crushed a few airplanes in my overzealousness to hold on to the model. Alright, so we'll keep moving our way across the fuselage, taking off any high points. So we know that this was a high spot here. May have to go with a little bit more aggressive sanding grit. Now that's pretty nice and smooth. It's still a little bit above it, so I'm going to take more off. The next step would be to remove the hatch. So there's a couple spots that we need to cut. We need to cut through these stringers here, and if you look at the former, get an alright angle for the camera. It's sort of tough to see. There's those pre-cut spots we need to cut across this former as well. So now we have our hatch installed and with magnets in place. So by simply just pushing it to one side and popping it out, you can see where the two magnets are there. Those are the main construction points of the fuselage. There's some additional things we'll be adding later on, including cross 1/16 balsa wood that creates a plate for the battery, receiver, and speed controller.